It is the back room at a funeral, the one with the coffee and the folding chairs, and there are two people standing near the urn, talking quietly. And in the space of about a minute, both of them use the same word. The first one says it softly, about her father, and there is sadness in it, but there is no fear at all. She means the place where he is now, the place where everybody goes. She is not saying anything terrible about him. She is saying he is dead. And the second one hears that word come out of her mouth and goes cold because he heard something completely different. He heard the place of punishment. He heard her say something about her own father that he cannot believe she just said out loud at his funeral with the family in the next room. Neither of them says anything. He nods. She keeps talking. And they both walk away from that conversation thinking something about the other person that is not true. They were not disagreeing. They were using one English word that their Bible used to translate three completely different words, and neither of them has ever been told that. That is the video. Now, let me show you the single verse that proves this is real, because I do not want you to take my word for anything tonight. This is checkable in 30 seconds, in whatever Bible is nearest to you, with no Greek, no Hebrew, and no commentary. Revelation chapter 20, verse 14. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. Read that again slowly. Hell is cast into the lake of fire. A thing cannot be thrown into itself. Whatever that verse means, it means at minimum that the word translated hell in the first half of that sentence and the lake of fire in the second half of that sentence are two different things, because one of them is being put inside the other. And your Bible uses the same English word for both. That is not a conspiracy. That is a translation choice made 400 years ago in a language that has since moved and nobody ever mentioned it to you. So today we are going to open the Bible on the three different words, and I am going to show you what each one actually is and where the second one is on a map, because one of them is a real place with an address and you can stand in it today. And I will tell you now, number 2 is the one Jesus used almost every single time he spoke about this, and it is not the one you think. Stay for number 2. Before I go one more sentence, 5 things nailed down, because on this subject, being careless would be inexcusable. 1. I am not telling you that hell does not exist. I am not going to spend 40 minutes taking something away from you. This is a video about vocabulary, not about whether judgment is real. Jesus talked about judgment more than anybody else in the Bible, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. 2. I am not going to settle the question of how long it lasts. That is a real question, and honest people who love the scriptures land in different places on it, and it is a different question from the one this video is asking. If you came for that argument, I am going to disappoint you on purpose. 3. I am not going to tell you who goes there. Not a group, not a denomination, not a category of person. That is not mine to say, and it never was. 4. And this one matters, because some of you are already tensing up. I am not telling you the King James translators got it wrong. In 1611, the English word hell meant, in ordinary speech, the covered place of the dead. It came from a root that means to conceal, and farmers used it about covering root vegetables for the winter. It was a perfectly good translation of a word meaning the grave. What happened is that the English language moved underneath it over 400 years, and the word narrowed until it only meant one of the 3 things it used to be able to mean. The translators did not make a mistake. The language changed. That is a completely different thing, and I want to be fair to men who cannot defend themselves. And 5, nothing in this video is telling you to leave your church or that you do not need a pastor. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 25 says, "Do not forsake the assembling of ourselves together." What I am against is a man standing where Christ stands. Before the first word, 2 quick things, and then I will not interrupt the scripture again until the end. Make sure you are already subscribed, so the next one does not slip past you. And tell me in the comments which city you are watching from tonight. I read them, all of them. Now, the one thing I want you to carry out the door, and it is a tool rather than an argument. The next time you read a verse on this subject and it confuses you, and it will because they appear to contradict each other constantly, do not start by asking, what does this mean? start by asking, which of the three words is this? That is it. That is the whole tool. And I am telling you now, from having done it myself with a concordance in an evening, that about half of the contradictions you have been quietly carrying around on this subject dissolve the moment you ask that one question. They were never contradictions. They were three words wearing the same coat. Number one, the grave. The first word is the ordinary word for the place of the dead. In the Hebrew of the Old Testament, it is Sheol, and in the Greek of the New Testament, the equivalent is Hades, and both of them get translated into English as hell in a great many places. And here is what it is where dead people are. That is the whole meaning. Not a courtroom, not a sentence, not a punishment. The state of being dead. And the proof of that is not subtle, and it is not something you need a scholar for. It is that the righteous go there too, all through the Old Testament, and nobody in the text finds that strange. Genesis chapter 37. Jacob has been told his son is dead, and he refuses to be comforted, and he says, I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. That is the same word. Jacob, the patriarch, the man God renamed Israel, expects to go there, and expects to find his son there, and says so as a statement of grief, not of doom. Job says he wishes God would hide him there until his wrath is past. A man asking to be hidden in a place of punishment makes no sense at all. A man exhausted by suffering asking to be allowed to die and rest for a while makes complete sense. But the verse that closes this one down completely, the one that made me sit up the first time I really looked at it, is a psalm. Psalm chapter 16, verse 10. For thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. Now stop and think about who that is about. That is not David talking about himself, and we know that for certain because the Apostle Peter tells us so. In Acts chapter 2, standing up on the day of Pentecost, preaching the very first Christian sermon ever preached, Peter quotes that exact psalm and applies it to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So take the English at face value for a second. If the word hell in that verse means the place of punishment, then Peter stood up in Jerusalem and told several thousand people that the Messiah was in the place of punishment and God did not leave him there. Nobody believes that. Nobody has ever believed that, because that is not what the word means there. It means the grave, the realm of the dead, and the psalm is saying that death did not get to keep him and his body did not decay. One verse, no Greek required. And it proves that the English word hell in your Bible cannot mean one single thing, because in that verse it is applied to Christ himself. Number two, and this is the one the title promised you, and it is the one Jesus actually used. Because here is a fact that surprised me more than anything else when I first went through this with a concordance, and I want you to check it rather than believe me. When Jesus warns about this subject, and he does, often, and he is more direct about it than anybody else in the Bible, the word coming out of his mouth is almost never the word for the grave. It is a different word, and it is not a theological abstraction at all. It is the name of a valley. The word is Gehenna, and it is a Greek form of a Hebrew name, Gehenna, the Valley of Hinnom, and it is a real place, with an address, south and west of the old city of Jerusalem. It is there right now. People walk their dogs in it. You can stand in it this year, and if you have ever been on a tour of the old city, you have probably already looked down into it without knowing what you were looking at. Sit with what that means for a second, because it changes the texture of every one of those warnings. When Jesus stood on a hillside and warned about this, he was not gesturing at an abstract concept or describing a place nobody could picture. He was pointing at a valley that everybody standing in front of him could see or could walk to that afternoon. Every person in that crowd knew exactly which patch of ground he meant, and this is the part that matters. They knew what had happened there. And before we go and look at what happened there, I want you to see how he uses it, because the two clearest examples are both verses you have heard and probably never noticed contained a place name. Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. That last word is the valley. And notice what the whole sentence is actually doing, because it is not what people use it for. It is a comfort. He is talking to men he is sending out into danger, and he is telling them not to be afraid of the people who can do the worst thing a person can do to them, because there is a bigger frame, and God is in it. It is a verse about courage, spoken to frightened friends, and it has been turned into a verse about terror, spoken at strangers. And then the strangest one, the only time the word appears outside the Gospels in the entire New Testament, and it is not about the afterlife at all. James chapter 3, verse 6, about the tongue. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. Set on fire of that valley. James is talking about gossip, about what people say about each other in a congregation, and he reaches for the name of the valley outside Jerusalem to describe where the damage comes from. Whatever else that tells you, it tells you the word had a texture. It meant something specific and terrible to the people reading it, and they did not need it explained. So, the grave, where everybody goes, and a valley, which is what Jesus pointed at in almost every warning he gave. And that is what we are going to look at next, because the history of that valley is in the Old Testament. It is horrifying, and it is the reason he chose it. So what happened in that valley? I have to warn you that this is the hardest paragraph in this video, and I am going to say it plainly and then move on, without dwelling on it, because it does not need decorating. 2 kings of Judah, generations apart, took their own children into that valley and burned them as offerings to a foreign god. 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 3, says of one of them that he burnt incense in the valley of the son of Hinnom and burnt his children in the fire. And 2 Chronicles chapter 33, verse 6, says of the other that he caused his children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. These are not pagans in a distant country. These are kings of God's own people, in a valley you can see from the city wall, doing that to their own sons. And later a good king came, and 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 10, tells you what he did about it. He defiled it, deliberately. He made the place ceremonially filthy so that no one could ever use it for worship again. It was the ancient equivalent of condemning a building so it can never be reopened. And then the prophet, Jeremiah, stands and looks at that valley in chapter 7 and again in chapter 19, and God says through him that the name of the place is going to change. It will not be called the Valley of the Son of Hinnom anymore. It will be called the Valley of Slaughter. The Valley of Slaughter. So put yourself in that crowd on the hillside. When Jesus says the name of that valley, he is not reaching for a scary word. He is pointing at a specific piece of ground with 400 years of the worst thing his own nation ever did buried in it. A place already named, in their own scriptures, as the Valley of Slaughter, already condemned, already a byword. He is saying, you know that place. That is the picture. And now, before I go on, I have to correct something, because if I do not, somebody in the comments will say it, and they will be repeating a story that is not true. You have very likely heard that this valley was the burning rubbish tip of Jerusalem, that the city's waste was dumped there and fires burned in it constantly, and that is why Jesus used it. I was taught that. You were probably taught that. It is in a great many sermons and a great many study notes. There is no ancient source for it. Not one. Not a Jewish source. Not a Roman one. Not an early Christian one. Nobody in the ancient world ever wrote it down. The story appears in a commentary many centuries later and then simply spread because it is memorable and it sounds right. I am telling you that even though the true version is less tidy for me, because I would rather you trust the things I say than have you find out later that I passed on folklore. And the true version is heavier anyway. A rubbish dump is a metaphor about worthlessness. A valley where a nation burned its children is a metaphor about something else entirely. And there is one more thing about that valley that I did not know until I chased a footnote, and it is the single best piece of evidence that Jesus was not inventing an image. In Mark chapter 9, when he warns about that place, he says a line that has haunted people for 2,000 years, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched. That line is not his own. It is a quotation, and he does not say so, because he does not have to. Everybody listening recognized it instantly, the way you would recognize a line from a hymn. It is the last verse of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 24, the closing sentence of the entire book. And they shall go forth, and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. For their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched. The carcasses, bodies, lying in a place outside the city, where people go out and look at them. So follow what Jesus is doing. He takes the last line of Isaiah, an image of corpses outside Jerusalem that will not be cleared away, and he attaches it to the name of the actual valley outside Jerusalem where their own kings had burned their own children. He is not building a new doctrine out of nothing. He is joining two things his audience already had, and both of them are in their scriptures, and both of them are about a specific piece of ground you could walk to. That is worth knowing for its own sake. But it also finishes off the objection we are about to deal with, so hold on to it. Number 3, the lake of fire. The third word is not a word at all. It is a phrase, and it turns up almost entirely in one book, at the very end, and it is described as coming after the judgment, not before it. Revelation chapter 20, verses 13 to 15. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Look at the order of operations in those 3 verses, because it is very precise, and almost nobody reads it as a sequence. First, the dead are delivered up. The grave gives them back. Whatever the first word was holding, it stops holding it. Then they are judged, and only then, after the judging, is anything cast into the lake of fire. And in the middle of it, the sentence we started this whole video with: death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. The grave itself is thrown in. The holding place is emptied and then disposed of. Which means the first word and the third phrase are not two names for the same thing. One of them ends up inside the other, and the text says so in plain English, in a Bible printed in 1611. And there is a phrase sitting in the middle of that passage that almost nobody stops on, and it deserves 10 seconds. This is the second death. The second, which means the text is treating the first one, the ordinary one, the one every person in that funeral back room was talking about, as a different event entirely. Two things named separately in the same sentence, one of them called the first by implication, and the other called the second. The Bible is distinguishing them for you right there on the page, and the translation that gave you one word for the whole subject went straight past it. That is 3. The grave, where everybody goes, a valley outside Jerusalem, which is what Jesus pointed at, and a final state after the judgment, at the very end of the book. And now I am going to give you a 4th, because I promised you 3, and the Bible has one more, and if I left it out, somebody would find it and rightly ask why. There is a single verse in the New Testament that uses a word that appears nowhere else in Scripture. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment. Cast them down to hell. In the Greek, that is one verb, and the verb is built on a name, Tartarus, which was a term Peter's Greek-speaking readers knew from their own culture, meaning a place of confinement below. And read what it is for. It is about angels, not people. Not one human being is mentioned in that verse. And they are reserved unto judgment, held, waiting for a court date that has not happened yet. So that is 4 English appearances of one word, covering 4 different things. The grave where everybody waits, the valley Jesus pointed at, the final state after the judgment, and a holding place for fallen angels. 4 things, one word, and you were never told. And your English Bible, in a great many places, calls the first one, and sometimes the third one, by the same word, and leaves the second one, the one Jesus actually used, completely invisible, because Gehenna gets translated as hell too, and the name of the valley disappears. Now, let me answer the objection, because somebody has been waiting since the first minute, and honestly, they have a point I want to concede before I take it back. The objection goes like this. Jesus never talked about hell at all. The whole idea came from a poem written in the early 1300s, and everything people picture is medieval imagination, not Bible. And here is the honest answer. That objection is about half right, and the half that is right is worth more than the half that is wrong. What is right about it? The architecture. Every image that comes into your head, the descending levels, the circles, the sorted compartments, the guided tour, the specific punishment matched to the specific sin, none of that is in Scripture. Not one word of it. That really did come from literature, and it really did get absorbed into Christian imagination so completely that people now quote it back as though it were a chapter of the Bible. If you have ever pictured a floor plan, you were picturing a poem. And this channel has said the same thing from the other direction before. Jesus gave us a scene, not a floor plan. But the half that is wrong is the important half. Jesus used the name of that valley repeatedly in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 5, in Matthew chapter 10, verse 28, where he says, "Do not fear him which killeth the body, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body." In Mark chapter 9, where he quotes Isaiah about the worm that dieth not and the fire that is not quenched. That is centuries before any poem. You can count the occurrences yourself in an afternoon. So the accurate sentence is not Jesus never mentioned it. The accurate sentence is Jesus named a real valley and used it as a picture of judgment. And a poet, more than 1,000 years later, drew a map that Jesus never drew. Those two things are both true. And if you say the second one without the first, you have thrown away what he said in order to reject what somebody else added. Now, the one thing I am not going to do, and I said this at the start and I am keeping it, I am not going to tell you how long it lasts. That is a genuine question. People who love the scriptures and read them carefully land in different places on it, and it turns on Greek words and on passages we have not opened tonight. Anybody who tells you that question is simple is selling something. It is a different video, and it may be a video I never make. And this one has been about something else. Because what this one has been about is smaller, and I think more useful. You were handed one word. The book uses 3, and nobody ever mentioned it. That is the same thing this channel keeps running into in a different costume. It is not that anybody lied to you. It is that a decision was made by translators doing their honest best in a language that has since moved, and then 400 years went by, and nobody updated you. And I promised you a tool at the start, so let me show you it working on 3 verses that look like they contradict each other. This takes 2 minutes, and it is the most useful thing in this video. Take these 3, one after the other, as an English reader would meet them. Ecclesiastes says, "There is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. Nobody doing anything, nobody knowing anything." Then Jesus, in Luke chapter 16, tells a story in which a man who has died is conscious, speaking, remembering his brothers, and holding a conversation. And then Revelation says that whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. An event which has not happened yet, at the end of everything, after a judgment. Read those 3 with one English word in your head, and they are a mess. One says nothing is happening. One says a great deal is happening, and one says it happens later. People lose sleep over that. People lose their faith over less. Now ask the question, which word is in each one? The first is the grave, the state of a body, and Ecclesiastes is speaking, as it always announces it is, from under the sun, about what is observable from here. The second is the realm of the dead, in a story Jesus is telling about the 2 sides of it. And the third is the final state, after a judgment that the same chapter says has not yet happened. 3 different words, 3 different subjects, no contradiction at all. That is not clever, and it is not scholarship. That is one question, asked before you panic. And it is available to anybody with a Bible, tonight, for free. So here is what I actually want you to do. And it is not a doctrine, it is a habit. Go and get whatever Bible is nearest to you. Open Psalm 16, verse 10, and read it. And notice what word is there, and who Peter says it is about in Acts chapter 2. Then open Revelation 20, verse 14, and read the sentence where hell is cast into the lake of fire. 2 verses. It will take you 2 minutes, And after those 2 minutes, you will know something about your own Bible that you did not know this morning. And nobody will have stood between you and the page while you learned it. And if you have a study Bible, look at the footnotes on those verses. Many modern translations already do this properly. They leave the words as they are and let you see them. That is a good thing, and I want to say so plainly, rather than pretend everybody is hiding something. And now, let me take you back to that room, because I left two people standing there 40 minutes ago, and I want to finish it. The woman by the urn, talking about her father. When she used that word, she meant the first one. She meant, he is dead. He is in the place where the dead are. Jacob used that word exactly the same way about his own son, and so did Job, and so did the psalm that Peter quoted about Christ himself. She was not saying anything about her father's soul. She was saying he is gone, and she was grieving, in the oldest vocabulary the Bible has for grief. And the man who went cold, he was not being cruel, and he was not being stupid. He heard the third thing. He heard the end of Revelation. He heard a sentence passed, and he stood in that room, holding a paper cup, believing that a grieving woman had just said something unforgivable about her own father at his funeral. One word. Two people who both loved God. Neither of them wrong about anything except what the other one meant. And nobody in that room could fix it, because the fix is not a doctrine and it is not an argument. It is 3 minutes of information that neither of them had ever been given, and that either of them could have found in their own Bible on any evening of their lives. That is what these 40 minutes were for, not to change what you believe about judgment. To make sure that the next time you are standing in a room like that, you know which of the words the other person is using, and that you can be gentle with them, because they are probably not saying what you think they are saying. Because the frightening thing in Matthew chapter 7 was never a vocabulary problem. It is people who were certain and busy and sincere and who hear the Lord say, I never knew you. Not one of them was wrong about a word. They were wrong about him. And you can be exactly right about all three of these words and still be a stranger to the one who used them. Now, before we close, I need to ask you for something, and I am going to be plain about it rather than clever. This channel only exists if people find it. That is the whole mechanism. There are 4 things you can do tonight. They cost different amounts, and I want you to do the one you can actually afford. The first costs money, so it goes first, and then I will drop it. Under this video, there is a button that says join. Tapping it makes you a member of this channel, and a small amount each month goes into keeping this work running. The research, the hours with a concordance, all of it. If you have never noticed that button, it sits next to the subscribe button on a computer and just under the video title on a phone. Think of it as sewing into the work. Nothing more spiritual than that, and nothing less. And if you cannot, and plenty of you cannot, and I mean that without a shred of judgment, here are the 3 that cost nothing, and honestly the last one helps me more than the money does. Make sure you are subscribed, and turn the bell on with it, so the next one finds you. Leave a comment, and tell me the city you are watching from. It takes 4 seconds, and it tells the algorithm this is worth showing to somebody else. And press the like button, even if you disagreed with half of what I said tonight. And then the one that matters. Send this to one person, not a group, one person. And on this video, send it to somebody who has been arguing about this with somebody else, because there is a very good chance the 2 of them are using one word for 3 things and neither of them knows it. You can end that argument tonight with one message. That is the whole ask, and I will not bring it up again. The next video I am putting in front of you now is where all of this has been going. Because once you have found one word that was handed to you without the explanation, the question stops being about words at all and starts being about who is supposed to be doing the explaining. Go and watch it while this is still fresh. And until then, go and check me. May the peace of Christ, who spoke plainly and pointed at real ground, keep your heart and your mind until we open the word together again.